Let's talk about request parameters and request queries. The request parameters on the back end when you're using Express is accessed through the object rec.params, and request queries are accepted on the back end through an object called rec.query. This is how we'll refer to either of these two things within our routes on the back end. So just to review, what is a parameter typically used for? Where have we seen this? What's the syntax? What's its use? First, it's syntax. Let's do that. Let's say syntax. We have a endpoint of campingisgood.com/gear/tents. And I don't want to get all the tents, I want to get a singular tent. What is the endpoint I would add to this here that would allow me to send any ID of any tent to grab that singular tent? /::. Yeah, and then this is like naming a variable, but since we're typically sending an ID, we're going to use that syntax. So request parameters, though they don't always have to just be used for IDs, though they are used for other things. A great use case is fetching a singular resource from a database by its ID. All right, and inside this rec.params object, what would this be called? What would we add to this? What to get this data? Yeah, whatever you called it here. So if we call it _ID, the data the user sends us in this endpoint is going to be referred to as this in our route. Okay, so that is the main purpose of parameters, fetching singular resources or identifying a singular resource. You can use it for user IDs as well. Queries are for filter, that's a good word for this, giving the backend filtering criteria. So let's see what a query looks like in action. Though we won't actually see it happen. Let's see the effect to the user of it happening. Go to Amazon.om. So if let's look for maybe clothing. Clothing works. Look at men's clothing. We're gonna find some shirts. And this is giving me everything. You know, I've got everything from shirts to onesies. And I'm not a big fan of onesies, so I just want to look at shirts and maybe tanks and things like that. So when I go into shirts, it gets a little bit more refined, but here on the left, there are these criteria. There's this refined by section, or filtering down your search criteria. So I can say, oh, only send me stuff that is an Amazon essential and the size is medium and the colors are blue. I have sent 3 different criterias for my search. I'm not saying get me all things that fall under this criteria. Go look for all the shirts, but then make sure they are only Amazon essentials, they're medium sized, and they're blue. We've filtered down our criteria. And this is what request queries do. We can send a query string in our URL that is typically used to refine a search of some sort, or sort something, or filter down. Now, what does a query look like in a URL? Do we remember? Question mark, you can see it here. Here's their endpoint, it ends in /x. It's a very small endpoint. It says /s, and then it says question mark. Let me pull this out so we can see it. Most of this URL is going to look pretty strange, but so we got Amazon.com /s question mark, and the query string starts. So maybe that stands for item equals fashion men's clothing. And then the query string continues. It says, and BBN equals this ID number. So it's probably like an internal ID number for it. And the RH, I have no idea what that is, and then it gets really crazy. But here's another criteria, Amazon Essentials in there, size 3. I'm guessing that's some sort of bluish something, QID, and RNID. So they're sending all these criteria so that the backend has all the data it needs to fetch the appropriate product. Now we won't need to add 10 queries to a request, but let's look how that is used. So a query string, as Aaron said, starts with a question mark, and then we give key value pairs. So let's say we're using the same website, Camping is Good. I wonder if there's a real website. I guess it wouldn't be that hard to find out, but here, tents. We're looking for all tents, but we want to filter this down. We want it to have a size of 4-man and a waterproof set to true. We want to make sure the tents we're looking at are built for 4 people and the waterproof status on them is good. So something may look like this. We'd say, you know, size equals, maybe that was the criteria they chose, size equals 4. And if I want to add another criteria, what's the symbol I need to put now? Ampersand, waterproof equals true. And the backend, when I send this in a GET request to the backend, this is how Express would receive it. It would receive an object called rec.query. And the object would look like this. It would say size is 4 and waterproof is true. So we're sending it in a URL, but just like the parameters, Express parses that parameter and turns it into an object so the backend can use it when it's going to talk to the database and get the criteria the user's asking for. So any questions on this before we actually start using it? Great. Well, what is a use case for this? Well, maybe we want all Power Rangers that are pink. Or, and for the sake of example, we'll duplicate, or we'll have a second pink Power Ranger, though I know that's against the what they're doing over there at Power Ranger place. Yeah, that works. Probably the most powerful weapon of them all. Okay. So we're going to make another endpoint because we want this to be the get all. We're not going to worry about, we could build all the query logic into this, but as your first kind of learning queries, it's easier to break it into a different endpoint. And I like to make an endpoint called Rangers/search. And this is the endpoint I could head up if I need to send a query parameter and get a specific subset of Rangers or Ranger. Think if this was like an e-commerce store, like what we just saw on Amazon. You have all these shirts, but you only want blue shirts size medium. You know, the object would have a size medium, color blue, but Power Rangers is more fun. So we're going to console log rec.query. We're going to send a request to the server looking for all pink Power Rangers. And where will we see this console log? Server terminal. Yep. Okay. Postman. So now we're heading up our endpoint /Rangers/search. And now this is the end of the endpoint. So I can start my query string with a question mark and say, I want all whose, what did we call it? Costume color is pink. I'm going to send this request, and then we're going to see what this console log, not that one, this one is showing. And there we go. So rec.query received our query parameters in the form of a string and parsed it and turned it into an object with the key being the name of the key in the query, the value being the value from the query. And we could send more.
Is it case sensitive for costume color? Does it have to be camel case?
It would have to be unless I lowercase everything when I was searching for it. Yeah, because my object is saved in camel casing. We'll look at a better way to do this in just a sec. But yeah, I'm having to do this because when we search, it's going to be looking for the literal word.
Why did it not bring back the entire object?
Because I didn't actually search for it. I sent a request to here, and all I'm doing is saying console log the query object they sent. We can now use this query object to filter through our rangers and find the ones whose costume color is pink by saying rect.query.costumeColor. And that is equal to the color that the user sent us. So you, the creator of the server, have to choose what you want these keys to be called so that you know when they show up in the query object what they're going to be referred to as. But let's add one more here just to see. Let's say weapon equals words. And now we'll console log the query object again. And now we have costume color pink, weapon equals words. If I console log rec.query.costume color and rec.query.weapon, we will just see pink words. All right, so we're receiving the data via the URL, just like the parameters, except instead of a colon, it's not a part of the endpoint, it's an extension to the URL as a query string. Now let's use it to actually get some data. And Alan brought up a good point. You typically don't see casing like this in a URL. If it's all uppercase, it's usually some big ID of some sort. But you get to choose what this is called. So I might just call this color. And then I'll find every Power Rangers whose costume color is equal to this color. And this is a bit more conventional. Color equals pink. So now instead of seeing costume color pink, we'll just see color pink. And it's going to be rec.query.color, because that is the name of the key I'm sending. What higher order array method would allow me to look through my database and find all objects that match this criteria? Find would find me how many? Find will always return the first match, but what if there's 5 pink Power Rangers and I want all pink Power Rangers? I know, we're making this up, don't get upset. Yeah, filter is gonna be best just in case there's multiple. So we'd say const found power or found rangers equals rangers.filter for each ranger in that array of objects. We only want to return the ranger if their costume color is equal to what? So if I hard-coded pink, it doesn't matter what they sent me. I'm just saying only return pink. Yeah, I want to know which one they're requesting through the query. So now I could send pink, I could send black, I could send blue. It's going to find the appropriate rangers and store it in an array here. So I can then res.send my found rangers. So let's see this work. That's why I'm like, you may not add 10 queries to a URL because that gets complex, but having a couple is nice. And making your own endpoint for this search makes it a little bit easier, not trying to include it in your get all, which would be what you're leading up to. Okay, so we send get request and we get back the 2 pink rangers. But now I'm like, wait, no, I wanted the fire brick rangers. So I changed the color up here, color equals pink, no, color equals fire brick. I hit send, and now it's just giving me that one. So I've filtered down my collection. I'm not finding it by ID, I'm finding it by some sort of property. Any question on queries? Because that's about all we really need to see of them.
So could you set up in that get request like multiple people now, or you have to set a separate get request to each?
You'd want to try to include them all in the one. Like this one endpoint is for filtering rangers. And so if we allow for 5 different criteria, or 3 different criteria, right? We allow them to search by weapon or by costume color or by animal form or all 3. Like they could send a query string that says weapon equals words and costume color equals pink or color equals pink and animal form equals sloth. It would check all 3, or we could send 2, or we could send an individual one. But our logic in that route has to be able to handle any of those events. So that's where it gets a bit more complex, right? Before immediately filtering, what if they didn't send a rec.query.color, they sent a rec.query.animal form? I'd need some good if-elsing going on here. Putting in, oh, do like a color and a weapons? Yeah, let's do that. So weapons, we'll do words and costume color or color pink. So we should only get back, oh, I just realized we didn't give any of them names, but that's okay. Pink, that's enough. So we should get back this object. So we're gonna send color equals firebrick and weapon equals words. We have to handle the ability for either of these being sent or both. How could we do this? Well, one way to hit it just like brute force, we could check if there's a query color and a query weapon and do something. Or then we just check, or is there just a query for the color, then do something. Or is there just a query for the weapon, then do something. So let's do it long form like that. So first we check if there is a rec.query.color, and they're also searching by rec.query.weapon, then search for both. Else if there is just a rec.query.color, then just filter by that and send it back. Else if there's a rec.query.weapon, just you know, to see one way. If you think there's or not think.
So for this specific case, we're just trying to find if there's one that has the matching weapon and the matching color.
Yeah, but they can send just the color or just the weapon. So we can't, if we don't want to search just by color first, if they also set the weapon, because if they send pink, it's going to send both of these, but they're asking for pink and weapon words. So we should only be finding this one.
What are we assuming? We're assuming that when they send the request, that it's going to have both?
Any.
Or one?
Yeah.
And if it only has one, then we're returning all the ones that have that match one.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is just one way to do it when you're setting one of these up. Now, once you add more, you could see how this would get more complex. So you'd have to find other ways to approach that logic. But we just kind of do what we did before as far as filtering is concerned. Our filter would just get a little bit more hefty. So we would find the found rangers. Yeah, found rangers. In this case, we'd say rangers.filter for each ranger. We only want to return them if two things apply. So I'm going to actually open this up, and if the rangers.costume color is equal to the rec.query.color, and the ranger.weapon is equal to the rec.query.weapon. Now, I don't want to keep saying rec.query over and over and over again. So what could I do to rec.query before I start any of this? Yeah, destructure it. So const, give me the weapon and the color from the rec.query. Now, there is a chance that they don't send one of these. So we're going to have to see if that breaks and whether we have to set default values or not. But if this is the case, we want to return the ranger so that in this route we can res.send found rangers that match both criteria. So that's the first if, right? We're checking for the costume color and the weapon. Then here we'd repeat same deal. Now, admittedly, this is not dry, but nothing is until we understand it. Ranger dot costume color is equal to the color. We can take these off too. Lighten the load a bit. How come I can keep declaring these constants like this? They're the same name.
They are responding to the bracket.
Yay, bracket scoping. Yeah, that's right. And this one's the ranger.weapon is equal to the weapon sent in the query parameter. It looks like a lot, but is there any questions on what we just set up here? You just kind of have to fit. Yeah, that form. Okay, let's test it. And let's see if we break it if we only send one as well. So we're going to send color equals pink And weapon equals words, we'll hit send, and we just get back that one. But if we just send pink, we're getting those two. And if we just send weapon, we'll get the one with the specific weapon. Sword. Cool, and that's why whenever you look at API documentation, they're like, these are the queries you can send. They have built out the logic to say, check for these criteria. If they've included them by this name, then do some extra searching before you send stuff back. Now this is a little bit easier to handle once we get to Mongoose, because we can just give Mongoose the query object and it will do the rest for us. But this is what you'd still have to be else-ifing to make sure you're checking the right queries.
So you're saying there's a way to make this that's something you can go over now, we can go over.
We can probably go over it later. It's not super pertinent to what we need to do today. You will get an exercise, but it won't be any more complicated than this. Query? You're querying something. So like querying. Yeah, searching. Yeah, so media queries search for your screen size and adapt the styling. URL queries then search criteria for the database to refine its search. It all has to do with like searching. I was about to look up meaning of the word query. Let's see what the dictionary says. A question, especially one, whoa. I disagree with what you're saying. Especially one addressed to an official or organization. I don't like that. Okay, let me get rid of that text. We're sending the key here. So I'm saying color equals pink. Yeah, just think of this as like an object. Instead of a colon, we're using an equal sign in the URL. But on the back end, it's going to be colon or color colon pink in the rec.query object. So that's why these are like, these have to be hard-coded words. It's an extension. The endpoint is this, and then the question mark starts the query string. Yeah, this doesn't have to be, yeah, costume color, because I'm saying find the ones whose costume color is equal to color, because that's the key I chose to send back. Yeah. Great, and that is rec.query. Stop this one here.